Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today I'm going to be making something I actually shared on my website way back in 2017. This is going to be an updated version now. We're making quilling paper watermelon. I have a pink that's called rose, I have a green that's called leaf green, a little bit of white, and a little bit of black. These are all from Quilled Creations and they're all 1/8 inch wide. I have my needle tool. I have some quilling tweezers, a little bit of Elmer's glue all in my needle nose container. You could also use clear glue for this. It might actually come in handy later on. You're going to need some scissors because we're going to be using a template. This is a template I made for my quilling paper citrus. I actually updated this just for this project, but we're going to be using it for our watermelon. You might also want a small pair of craft scissors as well, just to snip some paper later on. We're going to be building on our workboard covered in parchment or wax paper. We're going to need some pins and a ruler and a little paintbrush as well. We're actually going to get started with the white part of our watermelon. So this is what's going to separate the fruit sections from the rest of the rind. And we're going to be making a 4 times thick strip of quilling paper, and I've been doing this a lot lately. If you've seen my double thick strips I use all the time, same process, just doing it twice. So we're going to take our 18-inch strip of our white quilling paper, we're going to fold it down the middle and run a steady but thin line of glue all the way down from that center fold to one edge, making sure we're not missing any spots because that's going to make a gap in our paper. And then once that is all applied, fold it back over and then zip it on through your fingers just to make sure that the glue is spread and there's no air bubbles anywhere. I like to do it from every direction I can. And then you're going to let that dry flat. And then after it's dried, we're actually going to do the same thing again. So we're just going to fold it again, down the middle, as close as you can anyway. Doesn't have to be exact. This is going to be more paper than you need for each individual little watermelon. Oopsie. All right, so same thing, glue all the way down, one end to the other, and this is going to make a nice thick strip. It's also going to make a really sturdy strip. So this will add a little bit of structural integrity to your watermelon and just make a nice dividing line. But we're making this first because we want this to completely dry so that when we are ready to use it, we're good to go. So now I have printed out my template. I have just a couple pieces of the watermelon there on my board and some empty spots because we're going to be using that right there to make our little wedges of watermelon. Notice the template is split into 3 segments. We're going to be making 3 segments of this rose to fill in the little 3 pieces. So I have here an 8-inch strip of that rose quilling paper. I'm going to be using my needle tool, and I'm going to be very loosely rolling this all the way to the end. I have found that if I pull it too tight, it doesn't open up the way I want it to for this specific project. So I'm kind of like really loosey-goosey rolling it. The inside center hole is a little bit larger than it normally would be, and that is totally fine. I'm rolling it all the way to the end and letting it open up pretty naturally. I don't want any of the layers of my roll to be too wide. I want it to be as even as I can. We're going to be turning this into a teardrop, but we're going to then make it more of an eccentric teardrop. I made a video a couple weeks ago on eccentric coils. This is a similar idea. So we're going to start off the standard way. We're going to glue the end of our coil down. I dropped my glue bottle here. Bear with me. There we go. Tiny bit of glue on the end. And then we're going to press that to seal. I am holding the center of my coil in my hand there because I want it to stay right in the center. And I'm finding my seam where I just glued. I want that to be the point of my teardrops. There we go. So I'm going to press that end like a standard teardrop. I'm going to switch hands, still holding the center, just going to kind of flatten the back of this a little bit. I want that to be a little bit broader than it normally would be. Now I'm going to go over to my workboard and I'm going to turn this into an eccentric teardrop. So similar way to make an eccentric coil, I'm going to put a small line of glue from the center all the way down to the point of my teardrop. And then I'm just going to brush a little bit of that away. I want to kind of push that glue into the layers of the paper. I'm going to take a pin, I'm going to put it in the eye and pull it. Ooh, pull it all the way to the end, but not smushing the shape. I want the shape of that teardrop to stay. Get rid of any extra glue again, and then use a couple more pins to keep that all together. I'm going to link that eccentric coil video in the description box for this one. There is some other tips about how to make eccentric coils using different tools in case you're not familiar with this process. But what that's doing is pulling the eye all the way to the end just to give it a different shape and open up all those layers behind it a little bit more. You're going to need 3 of those made the same way for each watermelon that you're making. So everybody's dry now, everybody's happy, and we're going to start putting them together on our template. Notice that the watermelon segments I'm making here are a little bit smaller than the entire template because we are going to be adding that white and then some green for the rind as well. So don't be concerned if your segments are smaller than the template itself. Notice mine are as well. I have one pinned in there. I added some glue to the side. I'm wedging in a second one. Pins are going to be your friend for this project. Don't be afraid to really manipulate these pieces to get them into the shape you want. They're naturally going to want to kind of boing away from each other. That's okay. Use your pins. Get them real snug. The bottom, the widest part of your teardrop, does not have to be snug up against the one next to it. There is going to be space on the bottom, but the points of everybody should be as close as you can. They also might not line up in an exact straight line. You'll see in a second. I have sort of a gap right in the middle of what would be the top of this watermelon piece. They're not all meeting exactly flush. Do the best you can. It's okay if they don't meet at an exact point. We're going to kind of cover all this up in a second. I'm just going to use my pin to push it as close as I can without losing the shape. And this is what we're looking at this point. So I have my 3 segments there, nice wide bottoms, the points as close as they can be. We're going to let those dry together, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is using that same rose paper, and we're going to sort of wrap this all up. It's going to make it just look a little bit more finished. It's going to kind of pull everything together, make a nice shape, and it's also going to add another layer of pink, which is going to make those gaps on the bottom of each teardrop look a little less noticeable. So we're going to start off by gluing down one torn edge. We don't want a big thick cut edge there of our quilling paper. So a torn edge on one side of our watermelon. Pin that if you need to, let it dry for a few seconds, and then we're going to start wrapping the rest of the piece up. And we're going to do that by just adding a small line of glue around the bottom edge of those teardrops, and then just pulling the strip tight, but not like yanking on it. We want it snug up there. We don't want any gaps. And I like to put some pins behind it just to make sure that it's staying where I want it to, nice and flush against the bottom of these teardrops. Keep going all the way around. Now we have the whole bottom done, and we're going to again put some pins in, keep everybody right where we want them to be. Make sure everything's also gluing flat. We don't want any pieces to end up being higher than the others. That's why I keep pushing down there, just to make sure everything's level. If you want to, you can kind of make some points on the side if you want your watermelon just to have kind of the sharper corners there. I'm going to sort of manipulate it a little bit here and get that top where I want it. Remember I said we had maybe a little bit of a gap where the 3 points weren't hitting exactly. That's where we are now. I'm just going to put a little bit extra pins in, a little bit more glue, and it's going to make that a little bit less noticeable. It's still not going to be a super straight line, but that is okay. We're not going to make ourselves crazy over that. That is not going to be a good use of our energy right now. And we're going to do this twice. We're going to wrap it around 2 times. Here's where I kind of pinch that corner a little bit just to make it a little bit more of an angle. And then we're going to, like I just showed there, put a little bit more glue. You can put pins inside the teardrops if you are afraid you're losing your shape and you want to make sure that those corners stay nice. That's what I did there with that blue pin. And we finished the bottom, went all the way back around to the top again, and then just tear off the excess carefully when you get to the end of that second round, back where you started. I'm just going to get some of these pins out of here so we can see what we're looking at here and be able to dry everything. There we go. So a nice line of glue down the front here, and then just get this nice and set back over there. Might need a little bit more glue on that little end piece there just to get it to stay down. There we go. And we are about done with the pink part of our watermelons. We're going to let that dry. And by this point, the white piece that we made in the beginning of our video should be ready to use. So we're going to move on to that part next after this pink outline has been given a chance to dry for a few minutes, because we're going to need to move the pins out of the way to put that on. Now I have just put a few of the pins in the top line of my watermelon here. I just need to keep it in place while we put our white piece on. It's nice and dry here. It's very sturdy. I just want to soften it up a bit, kind of start the arc shape that we need. I'm just running it along the handle of my quilling tool here. And you can just use one edge of this. I'm just going to go right in the middle. But essentially we want to glue it to the bottom piece of our watermelon. Remember, this is what is going to separate the pink fruit from the green rind of the watermelon. So just like when we were adding that pink strip earlier, we're just putting a nice line of glue from one end to the other. And then we're going to get our white piece set up there nicely, pin it in place, and then let it dry. Couldn't be simpler. This part goes real fast. You just want to make sure that it's nice and tight up in there and there's no gaps. So feel free to use as many pins as you need and just get it all in there nice and snug. And we're going to let that dry and move on to our green section for the rind of our watermelon. Over here I am using a color called Leaf Green from Quilled Creations. I have an inch-long strip. I'm using my needle tool just to roll it all the way from one end to the other and then gluing it down while it's still on my tool. I'm going to give it a couple of turns just to get that glue sealed up. And we have the world's smallest little tight coil there called pegs as well. We're going to need a whole bunch of them because that's what we're going to be making our rind out of. This is exactly the same way that I made the original watermelon rind and the original citrus rinds that this template first started off as many, many years ago. And by now also, after I've made a whole bunch of those, my white strip has been dried. I'm going to snip off the extra. It's okay if it peeks out a little bit on the edge. It's not super flush there. That is okay. And then I'm going to pin it back on my board. Keep everybody in place again while I put the green parts on. You just need a couple of pins at this point just to keep it steady. And I have my whole pile of my little pegs here. When I was doing the prep for this video, they took between like 20, 25 pegs for each one. Go ahead and make a whole bunch of them. I also found instead of having to pick up my glue every time I wanted to seal those little pegs, I actually would dip the end in the glue before I rolled it and then just roll it all in one piece. It ended up moving very quickly that way. Now it's just a matter of applying these little pegs all along the outside of that white strip. I do about a ½ inch of glue and then using my quilling tweezers, just place them right in there. Another way you could do this if you don't have tweezers handy is put them back on your tool and just kind of slide them over into place. I might have made a good use of a couple more pins here. This is moving every time I'm putting these on, but that's okay. We'll get it together here. So we got a little section done, and then I'll move on and then put some more glue. And then put another few of my green pieces on all the way till I get to the other side. And there is our last one. We have all of our rind done. We have all of our watermelon segments done. The last part, I'm going to say this is optional because these pieces we're going to be working with are for the seeds and they are teensy, tiny, teensy. They are so, so small. I made pegs the same way I made the green, but I used even less paper. I used about a ½ inch. Made the same way. I smushed them right down the middle to make them flat, and then I cut that in half. So these are tiny. If you want to skip this part for your own sake of your eyes and your sanity, go ahead. You may skip the seeds. People are still going to know they're watermelon. It's okay. But for the sake of authenticity, we are going to make seeds and they're going to be really small, and that's okay. So I have a whole bunch here of these little tiny pegs snipped in half. And then I'm going to make a very little small pile of glue on my parchment paper there. I'm going to use my tweezers and I'm just going to dip a little bit in. A little bit of glue goes a long way for this. And it's just a matter of just kind of sliding some of these seeds in sporadically around the watermelon. I like to put 2 to 3 in each little segment there. There might be some glue that pops up. You can dab that away. This is another instance where clear glue might come in handy. And just place them here and there, wherever you feel like you might have a little bit more of a gap in your watermelon segments. There might be a couple layers that are a little wider than the others. That might be the perfect place to just sort of place them in there. Again, feel free to skip this part if you think this is just too much. I don't blame you. I definitely have my glasses on for these. This was pretty hard to see while I was doing it. Just going to add a couple more to the end and that'll be it. I have a watermelon here that is totally dry. You can see the seeds kind of peeking through the layers. You can also make a little wedge of watermelon by just using one of those segments and just adjusting the white and the green accordingly. If you don't want to make all those pegs, you can just make a thick strip of the green and add that on the same way that you did the white. Just another layer, just glued on exactly the same way. I hope you enjoyed this little redo of the old watermelon project. Look in the description box of this video for a link to my quilling paper templates page, and that's where you're going to find the template for this project. You can use it for citrus as well. You'll also find in the description box links to all the tools and supplies I used, in addition to a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can show a little of support to the channel. Helps me grow, helps me be able to make new videos, and you can also pick up some extras there as well to help you with your quilling journey. As always, please leave any questions you have in the comments section. I'll answer those as soon as I can. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for my next video. And I'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.